Good afternoon, Texas. How are you doing? That sounds like Arkansas. How are you doing, Texas? That's better. My name is Melissa Murray. I am the Frederick I. and Grace Stokes Professor of Law at New York University School of Law and co-host of the Crooked Media podcast, Strict Scrutiny, a podcast about the Supreme Court. Welcome to the Texas Tribune TribFest 2025. This is going to be a fantastic afternoon. We have with us today an amazing speaker, someone who truly needs no introduction, but let me try and do him justice.
Well, if you're going to say nice things about me, take your time.
I'm going to take all the time in the world.
Go.
Eric Holder served as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States, the third longest serving Attorney General in the history of this nation and the first African American to serve in that post. Since leaving the Department of Justice, he has been of counsel with Covington and Burling in Washington, D.C., and he is the chairman of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. And that seems to be a topic of a lot of conversation, which we are going to get into. General Holder is going to talk about all kinds of things today. No holds bars, no topics are off topic, so we are in for a real treat. We are going to spend about 45 minutes in conversation, and then the last 15 minutes are reserved for audience questions. And if you'd like to ask a question, please submit your question on your little handheld computer/phone to www.texastribune.org/ASK. That's www.texastribune.org/ask. And we'll collect all of those questions, and a member of the Tribune staff will ask those questions for you. So you don't have to do anything, just submit your questions to that URL. All right, shall we get started?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, there's a lot going on in Texas, and a lot of it has to do...
I've noticed.
Yes. Texas, what are you doing? Mid-cycle redistricting? What is this all about? All right, let's set the stage.
Wait, did somebody say we love it?
We love it.
No, okay.
It wasn't them. All right, so someone's doing it in the great state of Texas. First of all, for those who aren't as familiar with the whole redistricting controversy, what does it mean to do redistricting mid-cycle?
It means that somebody's trying to cheat. You know, I mean, we can come up with all the technical explanations and what's gerrymandering and, you know, what do districts look like, and we can get into that if you want to, but at the bottom line is that these folks are trying to cheat. They are concerned that the record that they have to run on is not one that is going to garner a lot of votes in 2026. They're concerned that because of the work that NDRC has been doing in conjunction with a lot of its partners, has produced what the New York Times has called the fairest maps in a generation. And they're concerned about running on fair maps because their candidates aren't necessarily good. The programs that they are trying to put in place aren't necessarily ones that are popular. And so the White House says, Donald Trump says, you know, I'm entitled to get me 5 seats. Texas. And Greg Abbott says, you know, how high, sir? And, you know, goes and gets him, tries to get him 5 seats. But he may not be getting him 5 seats. They do this based on an extrapolation from the turnout in 24, and that's probably the high watermark for them, given what we saw, I guess, last Tuesday in Virginia, New Jersey, and
all over the country, really.
All over the country, and compared you know, the maps that they put in place with that overlay, and then also look at the presidential map in 2020, midterms in 2022. I don't think they got 5 seats there.
So they may not be able to get 5 seats, but they've definitely set off a trend, right? So other states have decided that they too may help out this little presidential project to add more seats. I want to step back. It's not simply that their policies are unpopular and they fear losing in the next election. It's that losing in the next election could actually have real consequences for the man in the White House. If they lose control of the House of Representatives, lose their bare majority in the House of Representatives, suddenly impeachment is on the table. It doesn't mean a conviction will happen, but impeachment is by itself. To be thrice impeached would really be something. You would really be doing something. So there's a lot at stake in terms of oversight, in terms of impeachment, all kinds of accountability. And so that's part of why this feels so urgent for them right now, given everything else is going on. Some are arguing that redistricting and this fight between the states, either to respond or to imitate Texas, is really just a race to the bottom, and there's no digging out of this. How do you address those kinds of concerns that we can't have a tit-for-tat democracy?
Well, it is a race to the bottom. There is a way we can dig out of it. But, people get, I guess, amazed, upset that, the Democrats, progressives, didn't just say, oh, we're going to hold a conference, we're going to write an op-ed. We said, you want to do that? All right, you hit us, we're going to hit you back. And that's the deal. I mean, in the piece that I wrote, I said, in order to ultimately heal our democracy, and that's what we're going to have to do after this process, we have to save it first. And they could, through the things that they're trying to do in a variety of states, starting with Texas, they could alter the scale in such a way that our democracy could be, if not fatally wounded, really, really damaged, and put us in a place that we might not recover from for a generation. And so I make no bones about it. If Greg Abbott and Donald Trump said, all right, we changed our minds, and we're not gonna do that, I'd say, oh, that's fine. Gavin Newsom, California, let's pull back. They're not going to do that. And if they did do that, we'd still be suing Texas for the gerrymander that they put in place before they put this gerrymander on top of an existing gerrymander. So I don't, it is a race to the bottom, but the way out of it is to put in place federal legislation that we could have done when Democrats had a trifecta: President, Senate, and the House of Representatives. But Senators Manchin and Sinema did not want to carve out the filibuster to allow the passage of legislation that would have banned partisan gerrymandering, in addition to a whole host of other positive things around voting rights. The next time we have that chance, and it could be could be after the 28 election, we have got to use the power that election would give us and use it in a positive way. I've often said that I think progressives, Democrats, we are almost allergic to the use of power, allergic to the acquisition and use of power. And we got to get over that. Doesn't mean if we acquire power, we're going to do the same kinds of negative, special interest-driven things that Republicans and conservatives have done. But, Franklin Roosevelt wasn't afraid of acquiring and using power. Lyndon Johnson wasn't afraid of acquiring and using power.
So, when you say that Democrats are allergic to losing power, I actually thought of FDR, who many in his day likened to an autocrat or a tyrant. He made so much use of the presidency and tried to take so much power from Congress that people who disagreed with him said this is basically the fall of our democracy. What changed? Where did we go from FDR and LBJ to being the sort of feckless band of Democrats?
Okay, I'm not sure I'd agree with your feckless band, but I think, first, the critics of FDR were wrong. Let's look at let's compare FDR to Donald Trump. He was using legislation. He had huge majorities, admittedly, in Congress, but he used those majorities to pass legislation. He wasn't doing executive actions, and so he was doing things in a way that is consistent with the law and consistent with our norms. I don't know exactly how it happened and how we kind of lost our way, or how we've developed this uncomfortability around this whole power question, but I certainly think that's where we are. But I also think we're coming out of that. I do really sense that one of the things that happened in Texas, we formed up the National Democratic Redistricting Committee in 2017. And I remember the first press conference we had, I made what I thought was a great speech, and I was watching the CNN cameraman. He was looking at his watch, he was rubbing his eyes, and it's like, okay. So gerrymandering and redistricting was not really getting people. And I think we made a lot of progress, but I think it got really supercharged by what happened here in Texas. Now people get it. People understand, wait a minute, wait, why 5 seats mid-cycle? How are you doing this? And so now I think everybody understands how unfair the process is, the negative consequences of it. And so now when I speak to audiences, and it's gotten better, but especially after Texas, people are like, yeah, what is it that we can do?
It is especially brazen to do it so close to a decennial census where we actually did just do redistricting. So part of it just feels like a very obvious power grab. But to your point, you saw this problem and you were way out in front of it before anyone else. You founded the NDRC in 2017. That's 2 years before the Supreme Court blessed partisan gerrymandering in Rucho versus Common Cause. How did you know so early that this was going to be the big issue that it has become? Or that it's always been, but that we're now just recognizing?
Yeah, it's interesting because Barack Obama and I, former President Obama, and I were talking about...
I like how that was a flex. You just, Barack and I.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with Barack and he said, like, you
Yeah.
just dropped that casually.
Yeah, me and my boy Barack, we were, hanging around, having a beer, and but we actually did have a conversation about what did we want to do in our post-government lives. And voting rights has always been something that I've focused on, and he as well. And we said, well, what is it about, let's look back on the experience that we've had. What is it that prevented us from doing maybe all the things that we wanted to get done? And we really started to look at that gerrymandered Congress, House of Representatives, that we had to deal with. And I said, is anybody really paying attention to that? Not really. And so Nancy Pelosi, Barack, Terry McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia, all got together, put this together, and they said, well, who do we want to have lead this effort? Everybody stepped back, and I was there. And so
that's how it happened?
Well, no, not quite. It was something that I wanted to do, and so that's how we, focused on the issue. We saw the negative impacts of gerrymandering with regard to the president's agenda. And then if you look at the states and you see what's going on in state legislatures, where the problem in some ways is maybe even more acute. And look at Wisconsin, Ohio, Georgia. Where you got, Democrats winning over 50% of the vote and having 30% of the seats in state legislatures, and then measures being put in place in the states that are inconsistent with the desires of the majority of the people in that state, and yet the people who vote for that suffer no political consequence. And those measures are the ones that then get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, oh yeah, you want to overturn Roe versus Wade? There's not a poll in any state that showed that the majority of the people in any state wanted Roe versus Wade overturned. And yet you get these gerrymandered legislatures to do exactly that, rises to the Supreme Court, and then this broken institution that we call the Supreme Court says, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Well, the reproductive rights question is a really good one to illustrate the harms of gerrymandering. As you say, reproductive rights enjoys majority support in almost every state in the union, and yet in many states you have state legislatures that pass the most draconian abortion legislation that we've seen in a generation. When the people in those states, though, have the opportunity to register their preferences directly at the ballot box with ballot initiatives or referenda, they make different choices. Not every state has a mechanism for direct democracy. Do you think that's a better way to get at some of these issues that have become intractable in state legislatures?
I'm not sure it's a better way, but I think it's an additional way. And I think that those states that have allow in their systems the capacity for citizens to have their voices heard and through referenda, ballot initiatives, whatever, as you have in California. One of the big things in Michigan, the way in which we were able to put in place an independent commission there to draw the lines was because citizens can, through ballot initiative, put into law that which a state legislature might not want to do. And every place that we have had the ability to use a ballot initiative to say, wouldn't you like to have an independent body do the redistricting as opposed to an interested state legislature? We won. You know, red states, blue states, Utah, Missouri, Michigan, Virginia. I mean, they've all said, yeah, that's what we want to do. So I think having that as an adjunct to whatever it is that you might normally see elected officials do, I think that's a good thing.
So I want to tell you about something that I just learned about. I talked about it on Strict Scrutiny last week. I think it's absolutely brilliant. There are these ladies in North Carolina, and they founded something called the Can't Win Coalition. And here's their whole plan. They are recruiting candidates to run in heavily gerrymandered districts, because usually in heavily gerrymandered districts, you don't have a contest. Because people realize that the district is so distorted, you only have one person running, usually an incumbent, and that person is usually running unopposed. So these ladies, their idea is, we will recruit people to run, recognizing that these people are not going to win. In fact, they're going to lose, and they're going to lose big. But by running, they do a couple of things. One, they piss off the person who thought he was going to run opposed. I live for that kind of petty. Like that is amazing. So they piss off that person. They make it more expensive for that person to run. So they really drain their coffers. And then they drive up voter turnout, because the other thing that gerrymandering does is it suppresses voter turnout because people think their votes don't count and they don't bother to turn out. So it drives up voter turnout in those districts and statewide, while also recruiting a cadre of candidates who might be viable in the future. What about grassroots organizations like that? Like, how can we grow more of those to be petty, progressive, and promising? This is the platform, I think.
I'd replace petty with persuasive, if we're going to keep using P's there. No, but I mean, it's interesting. When we started our work in Virginia back in 2017, 2018, I was shocked. I said, how many candidates we have? They're like 99 or 100 districts, I don't know, whatever it is, in Virginia. We only had candidates in like 60 or 70 of those districts. Yeah. And I was just thinking, well, there's always, a Democratic opponent, right, in every district. And they were like, no. And so that was one of the first things that we did. We need to have people running, potentially, in places where they were not likely to win, but not likely to win. See, that's the deal. A well-crafted gerrymander is a hard thing to overcome. But, wave elections happen, and those things, there's gerrymanders and there's gerrymanders. And there's some really tough ones, and there are some that are maybe a little not as strong, potentially maybe even marginal. And if a wave occurs, surprise, the gerrymander, didn't hold. But it also has, as you said, corollary effects. Driving attention, driving turnout, raising money, developing candidates who maybe don't win this cycle but have the ability to win next cycle. And and it pisses people off too, and that's also a good thing.
Go look up these ladies. They're doing. I mean, like they're very petty, which again appeals to me in a lot of ways.
Persuasive.
Petty is good too. Like we're at the Nader. We might as well be petty right now. Okay. Okay. So let's back up and talk about how we got here. Can we talk about the Supreme Court a little? So we've talked about Rucho versus Common Cause. This is the 2019 decision where the court said that there was no role for federal courts to play in policing partisan gerrymandering, which means that when you have a partisan gerrymander, you can't go to federal court. You can only go to state court if you want to get relief for that. And that's great if you're in a state that hasn't been gerrymandered such that the state court of last resort doesn't look like a cabal. So that, I mean, they engineered that really well. Here's the other thing that decision in Rucho did. Because in so many states, partisan affiliation is very closely tied to race, which is to say that in many states, like Texas, for example, Black people are often Democrats. If you choose to racially gerrymander, which is something you can still bring to federal court, all the state has to say is, we weren't doing this based on race. We were doing it based on partisan affiliation. And then you can't bring it to federal court. So there are all of these ways in which now we actually have racial gerrymanders, which are supposed to be illegitimate under both the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act, and they can't be challenged in federal court because they're being recast as partisan gerrymanders. And we have one of these cases right now before the Supreme Court, Louisiana versus Calais, where the state of Louisiana has redistricted such that it's essentially eliminated minority opportunity districts. And one of the arguments that they've said is that we weren't doing this based on race, we were doing this to maximize Republican advantage, and that is okay.
Yeah, I mean, you all saw all these Republican Texas state officials saying, oh, we're doing this thing, this terrible thing, but it's partisan. It's not racial. I mean, I was really surprised, to even hear them say, yeah, we're gerrymandering here. I mean, I thought they'd say, well, population shifts.
No, they said it with their whole chest. We are gerrymandering, but we're doing it partisan.
But it's for partisan. It's for partisan
Yeah.
reasons. And they know we got that Supreme Court decision behind them. And if it's partisan, and think about that. We're going to deprive people. We're going to dilute the ability of just regular people, the power of their votes. But we're going to do it on a partisan basis. And to just say that out loud, I mean, it's kind of like, whoa. But you all saw that probably more than I did. The Rucho case was interesting. The NDRC has in its name National Democratic Redistricting Committee, but we took on Democrats in the Rucho case. We were on the plaintiff's side, suing among others, the state of Maryland, what Democrats had done there. Our theory of the case is if the system is fair, if the system's just fair, Democrats, progressives will do just fine. We'll do just fine. We got better candidates, we got better positions on the issues, and we'll do just fine. The conservatives and Republicans got to put their thumb on the scale in order to win and, break all the norms, break the laws. And so the Supreme Court, you wanted to talk about them, they have, I think, aided and abetted, a lot of this conduct. Through the Rucho decision, through the Shelby County decision. It's Shelby County versus Holder, but we'd ever call it that. It's just a Shelby County case. I don't want my name associated with that at all. Taking away Section 5 and the ability of the Justice Department to pre-clear in certain covered jurisdictions, potentially diluting Section 2 now with the Calais case. The Supreme Court, in Rucho, they said, can't figure out how you would handle these cases. These are political questions. Well, like every other court that has dealt with this issue found a way to do it. District court level, Court of Appeals level, state courts, all had found ways to do this. But 5 justices on the United States Supreme Court said, oh, we can't do this. This is for the politicians. And I wonder, if you had the ability to extract truth from those folks now, what would they say? I mean, the mess that this nation is in right now is largely as a result of that Rucho 5-4 decision, which I might add, if Merrick Garland had gotten a hearing and had gotten confirmed, it would have been a different 5-4, and I think we would not be in the same place that we are right now. So when we talk about, if we get to it, packing the court, Mitch McConnell's packing the court resulted in, among other things, the allowing of partisan gerrymandering.
So let's talk about one member of the court in particular. So John Roberts is celebrating his 20th year as Chief Justice of the United States. We don't have to.
It's been a great 20 years.
A+, no notes, 10 out of 10. So John Roberts has the reputation of being an institutionalist, and some of this goes back.
You all got to stop saying that. This guy.
I was going to stop saying that.
No, I mean I am sick and tired of the media portraying him as an institutionalist. It's because that gives him free rein to do a whole bunch of things that the institution never has done before. If you're an institutionalist, precedent should matter, If you're an institutionalist, decisions are not made on the basis of personnel, they're made on the basis of principle. And so I think there's a whole list of anti-democracy things that have come about as a result of his time on the court.
That he's actually written. So I was going to say he has this reputation, yet he's written 3 decisions that are probably the most corrosive for democratic institutions in any of the court's history.
And those 3 would be?
Shelby County versus some guy.
Shelby County.
Shelby County versus some unnamed attorney general, Rucho versus Common Cause, Trump versus United States. Of those three, which is the worst?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Rucho, I don't know. I mean, that's, they're all awful,
Well, now you sound like a parent. I love them all the same.
Well, yeah, I hate them all the same, but I'd also throw in Citizens United. Let's put that one in there.
Okay.
All of these democracy-defeating decisions that have given the ability to those people who are not really true to that which supposedly defines this nation, given them the power to do a whole range of things that have tried to take power away from, average American citizens, given it to special interests, and perverted, our democracy. So there's a suite of cases. It's going to be an interesting thing. I'll be alive, 50 years from now. And as we look back 50 years from now on that suite of cases, I think that will be seen as a dark period for the Supreme Court.
As dark as Dred Scott?
Probably not that dark, but only by that much. I mean, to look at, a race of people and say that they're not humans, they're property.
That's pretty dark.
That's really dark.
That's dark.
But these come close. These come close.
All right, so the court is one of these institutions that over the last couple of years, a lot of people have just sort of gotten more attuned to. Part of this is excellent podcasts that talk about the Supreme Court, more coverage of it generally. But also the court's just doing more and getting their hands in a lot of things. Is the court one of these institutions that ought to be reimagined? We're talking about this moment we're in where everything seems to be broken. And the question is, do we rebuild or do we reimagine? Is the court one where we just have to rebuild it with different, better personnel, or do we have to completely reimagine it?
Well, I think that generally we need to reimagine things. I mean, that's one of the potential silver linings of this dark period that we are now in, with all the destruction that's going on in a whole variety of places. I don't think we should be thinking about rebuilding. I really do think we should be thinking about reimagining. I mean, with regard to the court, I don't know if you call it rebuilding or reimagining. I think there's some concrete things that we need to do. And I wrote about this in my book. We need term limits. We can't have.
Do we need a constitutional amendment for that?
You're the constitutional scholar. I've seen ways in which it supposedly can be done, but I don't know. I'm not sure if this Supreme Court would say that, that's okay. But it's got such widespread support.
It does.
Republicans, Democrats, independents, conservatives, as well as progressives, all are in favor of term limits. The Chief Justice, I guess prior to becoming Chief Justice, wrote about, he thought 15 years was enough time. I've said 18 years, 3 senatorial terms. We can't have these people in these unelected positions with so much power. They're kind of treated in a very special way. They're kind of removed, and I think they lose touch. They lose touch with the America, with America as it now exists. So I'd have term limits. One of my other proposals is to have a president appoint a Supreme Court justice in the in the first year of his or her term, and in the third year of his or her term. So every president would appoint 2 justices in every term. And if you had 18-year term limits, you would expand the court in the short term, but over time, the court would shrink back to a 9-member court. And in that way, it would decrease the pressure that we see in these really crazy confirmation hearings, that we have. I might actually raise the age limit. You have to be like 50 years old to be a Supreme Court justice. People need to have life experience. They need to have failed at things before you get on the court.
Well, I don't even know it's just they need to have failed at things. And
failure's a good thing for people to learn from.
I agree. I think failing is a good thing. But I think I'm just sort of thinking right now about some of the justices and their emotional support billionaires. And at least one of them joined the court at the age of, I think, 43. And that's a point in a lawyer's life where you're just kind of hitting your stride professionally when you really start to make a lot of money. And when you go into the judiciary, that's not happening. And so, it's not a causal story I'm telling. This is anecdata at its finest, but it strikes me that when you make someone a judge at 43, you maybe make them more susceptible to those kinds of outside pressures.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, many people go into public service and think that it's a good thing. I mean, I like to think that's what I did. I spent most of my life as a public servant. But others go into public service and see others who are not in public service with a higher standard of living and then aspire to that while they are public servants, and that leads to all kinds of
If you're a public
problems.
servant, you're flying commercial.
Right. You ought to be flying commercial.
There's no private jet.
No private jets, and if you're the Attorney General of the United States, you do get a private jet.
Do you? Say more.
There are five cabinet officials who can't fly commercial. Now, I miss a lot of things about the Justice Department. I miss the people. I miss the work. I miss my plane.
Rank them.
Well, let's just say when I left office and the first time I was standing in a TSA line, I was kind of like, "Hey, it's Eric," And they were like, "Yeah, buddy, show us your driver's license."
Do you have clear?
I have clear. I got clear.
What's the plane called? Air Force 4, Air Force 3?
I think we called it DOJ-1.
DOJ-1. Okay. Well, this is a good pivot. Let's talk about the DOJ. This is not Eric Holder's DOJ. This is Pamela Joe Bondi's DOJ.
No, it's not. It's Donald Trump's DOJ.
Okay. As run by, doing business as Pamela Joe Bondi's DOJ.
She's just the vessel through which all of his desires are expressed and put into policy. The most recent of which is, so we got this whole Epstein thing going on now, and he sent out not a tweet, a social, whatever, what is this, truth social thing, whatever it's called. A truth, yeah, a truth social thing. There's no truth in any of that stuff. It's a truth social thing. And he said, you shouldn't be looking at me, you need to be looking at Larry Summers, I guess Reed, what's the guy's name? Reed Hastings?
Yes.
Bill Clinton. And so that's what you need to be doing. And so what happened today? Attorney General says, hey, we're opening investigations to Summers, Clinton, and Reed Hastings, and Southern District of New York is going to be doing it. I mean, can you imagine? You got to apply the Barack test. If Barack Obama had said, hey, Eric Holder, I want you to open investigations into, fill in the blank, 3 prominent conservatives, the world would just be on fire. Conservatives, Republicans, the media would be like, how can this possibly happen? And yet that's what we are now experiencing. There has to be a separation between the Justice Department and the presidency. This unitary executive theory of
fan fiction.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Again, abetted by that immunity decision out of the Supreme Court. When I was being considered, I was up for confirmation as Attorney General. I remember sitting down with Senator Leahy, who was the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and he said, now you're being considered, you're not going to be the Secretary of Justice. You're going to be the Attorney General of the United States, and you're different than other cabinet members. And, I understood this, but it was interesting to hear him verbalize that. Yeah, you're a member of the president's cabinet. You support the person who actually put you in office. But there has to be, a bar. I used to have, the Attorney General can put up 4 portraits in his cabinet, in the room, in which the big conference room. And one person I had up there was Elliot Richardson, to remind myself that, you might have to tell your president no, and it may cost you your job. But if you're going to be Attorney General, that's what you have to be prepared to do. Now, I never thought that Barack Obama was going to ask me to do something that, was going to cause me to say no and I'd have to resign. But I know I did things that I know people in the White House weren't necessarily happy with. But, they used to say Holder's got a tin ear or whatever. And I'm thinking, tin ear, I'm just doing what I think is an appropriate use of the independence and the power of the Justice Department. The politics, be damned. That is not the case today.
So the Justice Department as currently constituted, has begun criminal prosecutions of a number of people whom the president perceives to be his enemies.
After this conversation, I suspect our mortgages are going to be looked at, you know?
We're among friends, although lots of people are recording, I noticed. Anyway, of those prosecutions and the investigations that may lead to prosecutions, which is the one that strikes you as the most problematic?
Well, I'd say the Tish James and the Jim Comey ones are the ones that, but you know, that's so far. I mean, I suspect there are more to come. I mean, here I'll guarantee you this: Jim Comey is not going to be convicted. You know, go to Vegas, bet the house. This is trust me on this one. It's either not going to get past pretrial motions, or the government will present its case and the judge is going to throw it out. Or if somehow it miraculously finds its way to a jury, the jury's not going to convict him. You know,
Is this going to be like DC Sandwich Guy? If
Yeah,
the condiments don't
right.
hit, you must acquit?
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, you know? It's pretty good. She does stand-up in addition to teaching at NYU, you know?
I'm here all week.
You're going to be at the comedy club here? Yeah, but that's a good example, you know, and the American people kind of get this. You know, they went to a grand jury in Washington, D.C. and said, you should charge with a felony the sandwich guy. And I'm from Washington, you know, I live in Washington, D.C., and my fellow citizens said, get the hell out of here. We're not doing that. That's like stupid shit. I mean, that's stupid. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. And so they didn't do that. And so they end up...
They did actually deliberate. They spent a lot of time, and they were just like, you haven't made out your case.
Okay.
You think it was straight up jury nullification?
No, I think they did the right thing both in the grand jury as well as in the trial jury. You know, if you look at the charge that the judge read to them, you say there's a basis for their determination that throwing a sandwich on a guy that, again, he's saying I was covered with, you know,
Covered in mustard.
Covered in mustard.
The
and
trauma
onions
of
and all that
those
stuff.
onions.
And then they had a picture of the thing still wrapped up, you know, on the ground. It's kind of like, I mean, it gets to that level of absurdity, you know, but the people are pushing back, you know, and I think that's something that's going on in a whole range of areas. What you saw Tuesday was a pushback by the American people. The American people are slow to rouse, but once they get energized around issues, they become a mighty force. And I think that's what we are beginning to see. And I think that's what you're going to see in 26. If it's a fair election, and that's a big if it's a fair election, I think you're going to see a wave.
So I have noticed, though, that this administration is not acting like they're going to be accountable at the ballot box in 2 years. Do you think we're going to have fair elections in 2026?
I think that we are. I wonder about the degree of fairness. You know, I think the placing of soldiers and ICE officers who look like soldiers and Border Patrol people, you know, in masks and all that kind of stuff, I think that's to desensitize us to the presence of troops on American
The militarization
streets.
of everyday life.
Exactly. Yeah. And so if you deploy them, you know, strategically in critical places, you don't have to do anything to anybody. They're just there, which makes, you know, people who are, you know, the subjects of their attention, you know, the Hispanic community, decide, well, you know, maybe I don't want to get out there and go to a polling place and, you know, potentially put myself at risk, you know, for a whole variety of reasons. I come from, you know, a household that's mixed, you know, whatever. And hey, you might even be an American citizen who just happens to look.
I mean, these are what is now known as Kavanaugh stops, like where you can just pick up anyone who looks like they might be undocumented for whatever reason, and it's fine.
Right, exactly. And so, so I worry about that, and that means I think for those of us who are on the pro-democracy side, we've got to make sure that people feel comfortable in casting their ballots, and maybe that means a greater use of mail-in votes as opposed to showing up, you know.
Well, the Supreme Court just took a
the Supreme Court's got another one there to say how long you can count, you know.
Right, so the Supreme Court just granted certiorari, which means they'll review a case about how long the states have to count ballots that come in as mail-in ballots, and this is believed to be part of an effort to curb the use of mail-in ballots, which is so wild to me because it used to be the case that Republicans thought that they were advantaged by mail-in ballots. And now it seems that Democrats are, and suddenly they're no good.
Yeah, I think before the pandemic, it was, I think, pretty widely accepted, and I think probably true, that Republicans, especially in
The
Florida,
military, and the military too.
military,
Yeah.
through the use of mail-in ballots, that helped their side. The pandemic, I think, in some ways, changed that.
Everyone was like, I don't have to stand in line?
Right, exactly.
Great.
I could just sit at home
And mail it in.
and then mail it in. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how do we make our elections more fair in 2026? How do we sustain this energy? I mean, one thing we're not great at is keeping it up, right? I mean, this is a lot to do. And I think, as you say, the constant barrage of stuff flooding the zone is to desensitize you, but also to make you exhausted. Right? How do we keep up the energy for the fight going into 2026 and even beyond?
Well, we have to realize what the stakes are. I mean, this is not only about what we want to have happen in 26 and 27, but what is the America that we want to leave to those who come after us? And think about those who came before us and who sacrificed so much. I always say that every generation of Americans is ultimately called upon to defend democracy. Whether it's at Valley Forge, when we formed our democracy, Gettysburg, Normandy, Seneca Falls, when women get together, every generation is ultimately called upon to defend democracy. Stonewall, every generation is called upon to defend democracy. And every generation to now has met that call and been successful in the defense of democracy.
What do we say to those who would point to each of those episodes that you mentioned and say, stomping that out is preserving democracy? Because that's what's happening right now. Getting rid of people of color, getting rid of women's rights, getting rid of LGBTQ rights. We're doing all of that to make America great again, to preserve what we know this country is. That's actually democracy. That's us speaking.
That's them speaking.
And they say that they're us, that this is, like, they have a mandate, they have the majority of the population. How do we speak against that?
By understanding that this nation is at its best when we are most critical of ourselves, when we identify problems, issues, unfairness, discrimination, and then deal with it. That's when America is at its best. And America has the capacity, to deal with a history that is imperfect. This notion that we have to, whitewash history because, we can't handle, the ugly truths about some of the things that have been done in the name of the nation is totally is wrong. I got a lot of faith in the American people. As I said, slow to rouse, but once focused, we tend to do the right thing. Again, we have never gotten to the place where we are acting totally consistent with our founding ideals. There are still issues that we have found hard to deal with, maybe chief among them being race. Mm-hmm. But, we certainly can't go back to, when you say make America great again. I always wonder, all right, so when was America great? Like, give me the year. And I get the feeling that it's like
1953.
Yeah, mid-50s, June Cleaver, I don't know if you all are old enough to remember, Leave It to Beaver, she's, vacuuming in high heels and pearls.
That's how you know it's a TV show.
Yeah, there are no black people in whatever neighborhood they're in. All the women are at home. There are no gay people there, picket fences and all that stuff. And I think that's something that they hold on to. And that's a great TV show. I mean, I love Leave It to Beaver. Wally, Lumpy, Eddie Haskell. These are my guys. Eddie Haskell was my guy.
That's the wrong guy to be your guy.
I'm not the stiff you think I am,
He was an objectively terrible person.
Yes, Mrs. Cleaver, young Theodore and I. And they go, hey, creep, I liked it. I liked Eddie Haskell. This is a major detour that we've taken here. But that America never really existed, you know? That 1950s America was an America where black folks were treated as second-class citizens, where women didn't have the opportunities to which they were obviously entitled, where, you know, gay folks had to be closeted. And so, yeah, their view of what 50s America looked like was inconsistent with what the reality was. And so, but I think that's where they want to take us back to. And I don't think this country's ready to go back there. I just don't think so.
All right, so we have some great questions from the audience, and we have a Tribune staffer, Ryan, here, who is going to read them. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. I'm Ryan with the Texas Tribune. Thank you for submitting your questions. The first comes from Kara from Austin, who asks, has the bar been permanently moved for what a president and Congress can do?
Is the bar in hell?
Is the bar what?
Is the bar in hell now? Has the Paraphrasing Kara from Austin.
You know, it's interesting. Unless we take measures, among them, I think maybe you tell me. Maybe it has to be of constitutional dimension, an amendment of some sort to undo the immunity decision of the court, and do other legislative things, codify norms. We're not going to get back to the place where we need to be. We can't depend on, you know, the character of a person in the highest office in the land, and who serve in other, you know, high-level positions in Washington. We can't depend on that. We have to depend on the systems that we have in place. And I think what we have seen through this administration, and I think through the way in which some in Congress have conducted themselves, is that our systems are not up to what they should be. Our institutions, I think, have largely failed us, and we can't simply put good people in failed institutions and think that things are going to work out. I mean, I think the founders put in place a whole range of mechanisms out of concern that a person like Donald Trump might become president. You know, that's the notion of checks and balances, and this Congress has abdicated its responsibility in that regard. And I would say the Supreme Court, as I said before, I think has aided and abetted his acquiring power that I think under our system he's not really entitled to.
Right, so we have to like rebuild our system of checks and balances, make Congress a functioning check on executive power again.
Yeah, I think that's right. So yeah, the bar is really low, but I do think the bar can be raised, but it's not going to be easy. And we also have got to understand it's not going to happen overnight. You know, it doesn't mean if we win the election, if Democrats win the election in 28, it's a trifecta in January of 29, that just like that, you know, things are going to happen. You got to play the long game. Got to play the long game. That's something that I think progressives and Democrats have not necessarily done as well as our Republican counterparts. We got to, you know, think not only in terms of a cycle, but a bunch of cycles, not just in terms of a couple of years, but a decade and maybe even beyond that. I mean, the NDRC was formed in 2017. I don't think this thing sunsets, you know, at a minimum until 2031, 32. And I joined it and decided to lead it with that thought in mind. This is at a minimum a 15-year enterprise.
Yeah. Right.
Neil from Austin asks, did Merrick Garland fail as Attorney General by not prosecuting Trump but for January 6th? Was this a case of justice delayed is justice denied?
You know, this is a tough question. You know, Merrick and I have been friends for an extraordinarily long period of time. I do think the department did not act as swiftly as it could have, but I also think that given the immunity decision by the Supreme Court, it almost didn't matter, you know?
But we didn't know that decision was going to happen.
Yeah, we don't, but I think, and if the Justice Department had acted maybe more swiftly, brought cases a little more swiftly, I think you still probably would have run into this Supreme Court, or run into that, you know, that, as Trump says, that, well, no, as that great judge Eileen Cannon. I mean,
Florida's finest.
that the stuff that she did was just absurd.
Let me ask Neil's question a different way. Was Merrick Garland the right man at the wrong time?
Interesting question. I think Merrick is an institutionalist. He's a good man.
He's a judge.
He's a judge.
They're deliberative, slow moving.
Right, but it's interesting. And once he appointed, Jack Smith, things really started
But
to
that
pop.
was at the end. That was like
That was at the end.
2023.
But my point, though, is that shows that the department could have acted swifter. Had that appointment happened earlier or something like that.
Was it a mistake to start with the rank and file January 6th protesters as opposed to going for the head?
Yeah, I thought that was wrong. The notion that they're going to think of this as a regular criminal case and we'll build our case from the bottom up. I didn't think that was the appropriate way to go, because it seemed to me this was a case that's always going to operate on two tracks. Yeah, there were the people who were out there, on January the 6th, but the question also was, well, who got them out there? It wasn't just like people literally just kind of, organically showed up. There had to be some kind of organization, and so who was behind the organization that put those people in front of the Capitol? And so there needed to be an investigation, on two tracks.
All right. The next question comes from Heather from Austin, who asks, besides voting, what is the best thing everyday citizens can do to overcome gerrymandered races, especially in states that are heavily gerrymandered?
Well, I think voting is first and foremost, the most important thing. And then I think the question you have to ask yourself is, what's in your wheelhouse? What is it that you are capable and comfortable doing? And it's a whole range of things. We have at the NDRC this thing called All on the Line, allontheline.org. Here's the commercial. You can, if you're in a blue state, you can, through the Zooms and all the virtual tools that we have an impact in races in red states. Supporting candidates. Writing checks to candidates or parties that you support. Supporting organizations that aren't necessarily political, but have a great deal of importance in the political sphere. I think of organizations like the Brennan Center.
Great organization.
Great organization. Extremely.
At NYU Law.
Right, exactly. Very worthy of support. On the more political side, Indivisible, I think, is a great organization. Very, really smart in the way in which they deploy their resources. There's a whole range of things I think that you can do, but I think everybody's got to find something to do. You can't simply watch the television and yell at Fox News or yell at MSNBC or CNN, whatever, and just throw things.
MS Now.
MS Now, okay, whatever it is. You can't. That's not enough. That's not enough. Here's one thing I'd say. Dr. King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I said this a lot, but the reality is that arc doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when people like us put our hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. And so I think what you've got to do is ask yourself, what is it that I can do to help pull that arc towards justice? And you got important business lives, personal lives. There's football to be watched. I get that. But graft onto your your weekly existence, an hour, a couple hours a week. It might seem difficult to do at first. You'll get used to it over time, and you're going to feel better about yourself by being civically engaged, and you're going to make this nation better. So find the thing that will galvanize you, engage you, interest you, and make this country better. We can do it.
Can I add a corollary? Heather, you should be petty and run in a heavily distorted district just to make them crazy.
Yeah.
You don't have to win. This doesn't have to be your job.
One of the organizations that we work with is called Run for Something.
Yeah.
And and one of the realities is that who better than you? I'm just saying you generically. Who better than you? You look at some of the idiots who are serving in a whole variety of positions, not just in Washington, but in the states and at the local level. maybe you're the person who ought to run.
Ryan?
All right, the next audience question comes from Evelyn from Austin, who asks, what would the Eric Holder of 2025 go back and tell Eric Holder in 2008 as he was preparing to take on the Attorney General role that might have changed the course of history?
This is like a Terminator question. I love this.
Wow, I'm not sure I've changed history, but I was there for 6 years, and as Melissa said, I was third longest serving AG, but I would have told that younger, more vital, less gray hair guy, I thought I was acting with dispatch and with haste, and would have said, trust me, man, you need to be doing more, faster, and just be more vocal in ways that I don't think I necessarily was. Thinking that, there's the Attorney General is different from other people. You can't be as partisan, you can't be as political. I think I was a person known as with a fairly sharp edge. I think that edge maybe should have been a little sharper. But I think that would have been the thing, to really focus more and act with greater dispatch, greater haste.
A lesson for a lot of attorney generals.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Bridget is a law student who studies cases with your name on them. What does that level of impact on students mean to you? Did you ever aspire to be in case books?
Well, not as a defendant in a criminal case. It's Shelby County versus Holder, but that doesn't mean like I was being charged with a crime, something like that. Did I ever aspire to be in a case book? I'll be honest with you, that's something I really never thought about. You undoubtedly were an unbelievably brilliant and wonderful law student. That wasn't me. I didn't particularly like law school. It seemed to me to be kind of...
That's because you went to Columbia. There's another law school in New York. I think you might have liked it better.
Okay, maybe. That's entirely possible. Law school just seemed to me to be kind of removed from what I kind of knew or suspected the practice of law was all about. And so I never expected, nor did I aspire to have my name in a case book. I certainly knew I wasn't going to write a case book.
What is it like when you see young lawyers? I mean, I'll tell you a story. My husband was an assistant U.S. attorney in California for 4 years. He started in 2007 and was there when the administration changed, and he was there on the day where they switched the portraits in the lobby of the federal building. And my husband's African American, and they put up 2 pictures, yours and Barack Obama's, and he said he never imagined he would ever live to see this day. Like, my husband's born in 1975. I mean, like the idea that that was unfathomable, and then he watched it, and that he served in your Justice Department is something that fills him with enormous pride to this day. I mean, what is it like?
Yeah. Well, that's very heartening to hear, and it makes me think that, me and my good buddy Barack, did a couple of things right. It's interesting. A woman who I've known for, 30, 40 years, came to visit me when I was at the Justice Department, a white woman, and she came upstairs and she said the same thing. She walked into Main Justice and saw those 2 pictures, came up in the elevator, walked to the 5th floor, and she said, I've been trying to hold it, and I've been trying to hold it, and she just put her arms around me and started crying. And I said, Sandy, what's going on? She said, I just never thought I'd see the day, and it says a lot about our country that you got these 2 black guys. Well, she said these 2 good-looking black guys.
This feels like editorializing.
I'm just quoting her, all right?
Okay.
But she said that you have these 2 black guys who are the Attorney General and the President of the United States. And so I think that's, in some ways, a marker of what this country can do. And it is why I have enduring faith in this nation. We don't always get it right. but at our best, we're always trying to get it right. And I think this is this is a progressive era, I think, that is struggling to be born. Barack's election leads to, to this era, a reaction to that. But there's a reaction to the reaction. And I think there's everything from income inequality, the flouting of norms. There's a whole range of things the American people are kind of, put off by. And I think that the answer to that is a new progressive era. And I think that's, if we work for it, if we put in the work, that becomes possible. There are no saviors. There's no miracles happening. There's not a cavalry coming. As we always say, we are the people that we are waiting for. But we have the power. We do have the power to make this nation better.
All right, with that, let's get to work, Texas. Please join me in thanking Attorney General Eric Holder.